Thank you, Madam Toastmaster. All my fellow Toastmasters, thank you for allowing me to join you today. So, I was still in my early 20s and a baby nurse when I had epiphany. I had one of those shifts, you may have experienced it, because everything hit the fan. It was a terrible day, every which way. And after our shift was over, we were charting, and one of the next shift comes in and said, "Hey, how's it going?" And I stopped and I thought, I said, "You know what? At least I'm on the right side of the doors." Because when I finished crossing the T's and dotting the I's, I could clock out and go home, something that none of my patients had the luxury of doing. And for the next couple of decades, that became my mantra. Anytime I had a bad shift, I was on the right side of the doors. Fast forward to August of 2024. I saw my audiologist for a follow up, and she took a really long time with her exam. And when she finished, she said, I think you need to see an ear, nose, and throat specialist because I'm getting some inconsistencies. I thought, great. Just what I wanted to have to go see somebody else. But scheduled my appointment. And in the meantime, a month after my audiology appointment, I had a brain MRI in preparation to see my ENT. When I walked out, I jokingly said to the tech, "You know what? I have seen so many brains over the years. I would love to see my own." And she's like, "You know what? Sure, no problem." She burnt me a disc, and I merrily went on my way. I got home, downloaded the program that I needed in order to be able to see that disc, and I started scrolling through my images. And then I saw it. There was a white spot, a big white spot. White spots don't belong in brains, especially not your own. That was the beginning of my journey to the other side of the doors, that is. January 7th, 2025 was the day of my surgery and the most terrifying day of my life. Because as we pulled into the parking lot, the top of my lip became numb. By the time we got to the preoperative waiting area, the entire right side of my face was paralyzed. I couldn't blink. I couldn't talk properly. And my nursing brain was going a million miles a minute. And I was wondering if it was going to progress or if I was even going to make it home. It was inside of that preoperative room that I truly learned the difference between a caring worker and one who's just there for the hours. Because my nurse that day was cold and indifferent. And alongside the terror that I felt building up inside, also felt an overwhelming shame for what my body had become because of her attitude towards me. Thank heavens my surgeons walked in with a completely different attitude. They did an assessment, they took me to the OR, and I didn't know it, but they expected my paralysis to be permanent. Yet when I woke up from my surgery, I had full facial function. It wasn't long before the word spread about this miracle patient in the neuro ICU. And the next day, I had a constant flood of doctors coming into my room to ask me questions and do neuro checks. I felt like a trained monkey as all day long I repeated the same thing over and over. Over the next week in the ICU, another subsequent surgery, physical therapy, all the things, I gained a brutal appreciation for what my patients go through because I experienced a pain unlike anything I had ever known. And my body and my brain, they didn't want to cooperate. When I finally got home, I followed all of my discharge instructions. I employed my skills as a nurse and a coach, and it wasn't enough. I wasn't healing fast enough. And I had plenty of time on my hands, so I did a lot of reading. One of the books I read was James Nestor's book, Breath. Sorry for the blur. And I began noticing parallels between the bad breathing and my breathing. And in the book, there's all sorts of different techniques, and I investigated every single one of them. I ended up coming upon one called Oxygen Advantage, where you actually breathe less to oxygenate more. And it was like a light bulb went off. I had been in the medical field for over 20 years helping people breathe. And I was learning things I had no idea about. How could I have missed the most foundational aspects of our breath? I didn't just study about the breath, I started practicing it. And 6.5 months after my brain surgery, I ran a 5K with my mouth closed, breathing only through my nose. All my life, I've struggled with exercise induced asthma. And since I've started this new breathing practice, I have not wheezed once. I can't walk in a straight line half the time, but I haven't wheezed yet. And I found that my surgical team in modern medicine, they were brilliant. They saved my life. And by the grace of God, figuring out proper breathing mechanics and a whole heck of a lot of hard work, I've learned a new way to live. My new normal includes struggles I never would have imagined, yet I have a greater empathy for my patients and a greater understanding of the human ability to heal, adapt, and persevere. And I no longer look at those doors in the same way. At one time, they separated me from my patients. But today they remind me that our health is often something we take for granted until we lose it. 80% of the time, we can make choices to prevent that downward spiral that leads to the other side of the doors. Let that sink in. 80% of our health is based on our choices. Choices that make us happier, small habits that make a tremendous impact. Think about your daily choices. What one small change can you make to do less and create more? In that one small choice, you may find your next epiphany. The doors, they'll always be there. Which side do you want to be on?